An alcoholic. I'm very grateful that I survived another week to be here. It wasn't always a certain thing this week. I got a couple of assassins out looking for me. I think I can dodge them though until I get. Some guy seems to want his refrigerator and I can't get it delivered to him, and he's got deer meat he wants to keep cool. We finally arrived at step 11 after 14 arduous weeks. This is week 14, isn't it? Yeah. And if you turn to page 85 in the big book, we're going to read the instructions first tonight. And down at the bottom paragraph, it says step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. And the word suggest, I think some of the agnostics and atheists in the early days of the program insisted that be put in there because step 11 certainly doesn't suggest anything. It seems to direct from the standpoint that the people that wrote this book said this is what we have done. This is precisely what we have done to recover from the disease of alcoholism. And step 11 says that we do use prayer and meditation in our lives if we want to thoroughly follow their path. So you can read it as suggest if you want to. It was meant that this is indispensable in the spiritual program of Alcoholics Anonymous. There is no spiritual side of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. There is no spiritual part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is a spiritual program. It says in the foreword to the 12 and 12, and we read it a number of weeks ago. It says that the AA 12-step program are a group of principles spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life will expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to live happily and usefully whole. I like to talk about the word suggest in there. It is not a loophole in my life. It says we shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. And I was shy on this matter of prayer. It was embarrassing to me to embark upon a prayer life because I had never called on anybody in my entire life in a fair fight. And I assumed that I was in a fair fight even though I kept getting my ass kicked repeatedly. And once I became convinced that the disease of alcoholism was a little bit more powerful than I was, and that I wasn't in a fair fight, and I had to swallow my pride and do something that I had never done and something that I absolutely did not want to do. And that was to become humble and admit that there was a power greater than myself, and then to take action upon that in step 11. And when I sponsor people, I suggest, and we're going to read the instructions here in a minute, I suggest that they put the directions for step 11 into their life as soon as they can, regardless of where they may be in the numerical working of the steps. It says we shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. And that was kind of insulting to me, too, that there were better men than me. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. Prayer doesn't work without the proper attitude and without work. It says it would be easy to be vague about this matter. It certainly would. And that's why Bill put very specific instructions in this book. Yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. And Bill's got us going to bed here before we get up. And I know there's a reason for that. And I haven't been able to smoke it out of the woodwork. But maybe one of these days somebody will tell me why he goes to bed before he gets up. It says, when we retire at night, and these are instructions. It says, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. 10th step that we talked about last week. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Step 4 and 5. Do we owe an apology? Step 8 and 9. Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Take a look at step 3. Did I live my life free of the bondage of self? Or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? Was I concerned about what I was going to get or what I was going to give? You know, this book says over and over that if I want to feel good about myself, if I want to have this thing called self-esteem, that I don't work on these things. I do things for other people, and these things will happen in my life. So remember back on page 14, simple but not easy, a price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. And on page 20, as ex-problem drinkers, our very lives depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. That's the program. What am I going to give to others? What are others going to give to me, or what am I going to take from others? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. And this is a difficult thing in step 10. When I'm used to always blaming myself, when I'm used to always being ashamed of myself, when I'm always used to not recognizing what I do right and not putting into perspective what I do wrong, you know, it's easy to drift into this worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. You know, I've talked about how I've had to forgive myself. I've had to learn how to forgive myself for today, and to forgive myself for the past, and look for the errors in my thinking that cause my wrong actions, and to see what I need to do differently to get different results tomorrow. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Now, those are the instructions that Bill gives in here, but you hear a lot of talk around the tables about what other people do. A lot of people, and myself including, I like to thank God that I stayed sober another day. I think that's probably a pretty good discipline for me, you know, to recognize that I didn't do it. That once again I got this daily reprieve because I was willing to do something to maintain my spiritual condition one day at a time. Now Bill's got us waking up. He says, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. And this is probably one of the hardest disciplines there is to get into, because I don't know, and unless you live alone, unless you are an early riser, typically when you get up in the morning, you've already made arrangements to be 5 minutes late to work if you don't get every green light. The neighbor's banging on the door wanting to borrow some coffee because his wife's too lazy to go to the grocery store. The kid's screaming, etc., etc., etc. If you want to work at anything in your life, you have to set time aside for it. You know, I can't get to work, I can't go to work, I can't do any work if I'm not willing to make the sacrifice to set some time aside between the hours approximately of 8 to 5 to show up and perform that task, whatever it may be. The same thing applies to the program of Alcoholics in My Life. I'm talking about putting my day in order before I live it. I am required to set time aside in the morning to do it. I can't do it in the car on the way to work. I can't do it in the shower. I can't. I've got to set some time aside for me and for God. So it says, before I do any of this, I ask God to direct my thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Then I start thinking about my 24 hours ahead. Then I consider my plans for the day. It says, under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. And you remember, those of you who may have been here, I talked about the trinity of a human being: the mind, the brain, and the body. And Bill uses these terms in the context that I talked about. It says God gave us brains to use. That is written in such a way that the brain is a tool to use by me, which is something separate from my brain. My mind is me. I am my mind. My mind is where I live. It is my spirit. It is my soul. It's where I know who I am. It's where I know the difference between right and wrong. It is my conscience. And the brain is my tool to use, to direct. And I talked about this in conjunction with the third step, where it talks about self-will run riot, and the alcoholic is usually an extreme example. Self-will run riot is where the brain is in control of my life, and I'm letting my mind be passive and not run the show. The brain takes over and it starts running my life on the basis of bad data. It's just like any other computer. It can only work with the data that's loaded into it, and I loaded some bad shit in there. And I'm in the process of reprogramming my computer. It says our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. When my thought life is cleared of wrong motives, the wrong motives being self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. When I start thinking of other people rather than myself, then my thought life moves to a much higher plane. You know, everybody's job causes them problems. And we talk about this, and I'm only talking about this for example. You have to start looking at circumstances and events and responsibilities in your life in a different way to clear these wrong motives out. And we talk about this in the 12th step about a job. You know, my job is where I perform a service. I give a service. I don't show up and get paid. With wrong motives, that's what I do. But when I look at my job as rendering a service, one of the incidental things of performing that service, I am given money with which to buy some things that make my life a little easier. Not that sustains my life, because remember, there's only three things that any human being needs to live for 24 hours: air, water, and a place to stand on the planet, and they're all free. I get some money with which to make my life a little easier, a little more pleasant, a little more enjoyable. It gives me some money and an opportunity to use it to benefit other people. When I spend my money, I am benefiting other people. And nobody needs to thank me for spending my money. Every dollar I spend goes into someone's paycheck somewhere. Every dollar I put in the bank, and I put very few in the bank, that doesn't have somebody else's name on it, but that goes into somebody's home. Somebody borrows it, builds a home. And the people that build that home, they get paid for driving the nails. So, divorcing myself from this self-seeking, is trying to see what my life is all about. What does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to live in this society? What am I doing and what am I accomplishing? How am I helping? What's the true meaning of my existence? What is the purpose of my existence? This book says it's to help other people, and I have to start to look at everything to see how I am doing that. Bill doesn't talk too much in here about meditation like he does in the 12 and 12. Well, I'll get to that on page 87. It says, in thinking about our day, down in the bottom paragraph, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. Indecision about what I'm going to do. Indecision about what my alternatives are. Indecision about what alternative is best. I may not always know. I may not be able to figure that out with my magnificent mind. The word if is the most powerful word in the language.
That's
right. It differentiates, or it sets us apart from the lower forms of animals, or what's called the lower forms of animals. Nobody can talk to them. We don't know whether they're superior to us or not. But if signifies that I am, in any situation, I'm confronted with multiple alternatives, each with alternative outcomes. And I had to learn to start seeing my opportunities in life as being varied. There's always more than one alternative to any situation or course of action. And for each alternative, there are always more than one possible result. So I've got to stop thinking in straight lines. I've got to see that there aren't any guaranteed results in life. But that doesn't mean that the one that I think should be guaranteed is any better than the one that actually happens. And I have to start to look for the good in everything that happens. And I don't know whether I've said it in this series of talks or not, but I like to say that nothing bad's ever happened to me in my entire life. Just things that I didn't like or didn't understand. But the outcome of everything has ultimately been to my benefit. Being terminally ill with the disease of alcoholism has ultimately been to my benefit. And that's whether I survive the disease or not. Today it's to my benefit, and that's all I have to be concerned about. When I was drunk, I couldn't see that it was to my benefit. What it was, I just couldn't see it. Today I can see it. I don't know how I got off on that tangent here. It says, we may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. And I don't know how God operates in your life, but He does not talk to me directly. It says, I ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Okay, Bill talked about the brain over here. Now he's talking about the mind, the working part of the mind. This is where I can trust once I clear out the wrong motives. It says an inspiration or a hunch, an intuitive thought or decision. I had to learn how to trust my mind after I was able to identify that I had one. But my brain is always trying to talk me out of this stuff. I say, hey, that's a good idea. And it is. But my brain will say, no, if you do that, what if? How about? Look out. Warning. So, what the book's saying here is that once I get involved in this prayer life, I've got to start listening for the answers in my mind, in my spirit, in my soul. My mind is where I have a conscious contact with God. My brain is not capable of having a contact with God. When I'm going through this, if I can't devote my mind and shut off my brain, devote my mind to this energy and shut off my brain, and my brain is saying, hurry up, you're going to be 5 minutes late for work, you got that appointment. look out. Or, you're taking too much time. You got to take a shower. You haven't shaved yet. You remember what she said last night. She ate the last cookie again. I don't have any conscious contact. And I don't have a productive prayer life. I'm going through the motions, and I'm saying, yeah, I'm trying this prayer stuff, but it just doesn't work. No, it doesn't. No, I got my brain involved, and it doesn't work. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. And I guess that I am inexperienced for the rest of my life because I haven't been at this all of my life, but a good number of 24 hours, and I'm not inspired at all times. I don't always know what the answers are. I don't always have the intuitive thought or the hunch. But I've learned that sometimes the best action is no action. That sometimes I have to wait, even though it's not convenient for me or somebody else. I have to wait until I know what the right thing is to do. Now, I can use that as a terrible excuse to procrastinate and put off and loaf and say, I haven't received words from on high yet. I shan't act. So I got to be careful with that. And I can be careful with that if I recognize what I'm trying to accomplish. And sometimes I have to just shoot in the dark because I can't wait. I don't know what's right, but I got to do something and see what happens. If something gets torn up because I took the right action, I won't pursue it until it gets so torn up that I can't fix it. You know, if I hit a brick wall, I'll back up and see where the door is. And that's what life's about, you know, is doing something, see what happens, and then take corrective action if the results aren't acceptable to me or other people. It says we may pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. I have to be careful. I have to be in touch with reality in this. You know, I can't say, well, I've decided to go about nude in public because God has spoken to me. I wasn't born with any clothes on. I can't start doing absurd actions and justifying them on the basis of these inspirations and hunches. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. It means that when I rely, what I'm starting to rely on is me, the guy that lives in my mind. When I get all of that rubble pulled off of him and he can breathe again, I find out, hey, I can trust you again. You're always right. You always know what's right for you. You always know what's the right thing to do is for other people. And I come to rely on that, whether I like it or not, or whether I understand it or not. You know, I've got to come to rely on it. It says we usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we would be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. And Bill's been talking about meditation here, and meditation is used to clear the mind so that I can properly so I can have a proper prayer life, a prayer life that puts me in touch, my spirit in touch with God as I understand Him. And I know most of you, a lot of you, either do use or have been told to use or asked to use or suggested that you use a daily meditation book. And I think they're good. I don't care which one it is. Any of them are good. Notice I said any one of them. Not two of them. Not three of them. Not four of them. Not five of them. You know, people that want to get well real quick, they read every meditation book they can find every morning. Here is the purpose of reading a meditation book, as far as I can determine. A meditation book is intended to give me a message that I use throughout the day. If I read 2, 3, 4, 5 meditation books every morning, I don't know what the message is because I'm not capable of keeping that much in focus throughout my day. I read one meditation book. I read the message for that day. I don't read behind. I don't flip ahead. I don't browse through. If it's August the 14th, I read August the 14th. If it's August the 14th and I didn't do my work on August the 13th, I don't go back and read the 13th and the 14th. I read one a day. The purpose of that is to find what the message is in that daily reading. There will be a principle in that daily reading. It may be honesty, it may be patience, it may be love, it may be tolerance, it may be service. There is a message in the daily reading. That is what I'm looking for. That is what I want to concentrate on for that day. Now, what I had to concentrate on yesterday, I can forget about. If the message is patience, then I've got to live my day with patience. I have to be constantly on guard against impatience. And if I can't remember the message that I got out of my daily meditation book that morning, then what I need to do is I need to write it down on a slip of paper and put it somewhere where I will physically touch it throughout my day, like down in the pocket where I keep my keys and my change. And it will be a constant reminder. And if I forget, I can pull it out. If I forgot what was the message, I can pull it out and I can read it. If I forget that I'm even supposed to be remembering a message every time I get my keys or my change out, I remember I've got to be living something today. That's the only thing I have to worry about. And it's important to read one book, because if you've ever read through a meditation book from all 365 days, they follow a pattern. There is a slow buildup of information. One day builds upon the other, and they will cover a principle, a spiritual principle. Then they'll go to another spiritual principle and to another spiritual principle, and there aren't that many of them. I've never sat down and counted them, but if you read the same book for 365 days, you will have, and you practice each principle on each day, you will have practiced in a year each principle maybe 3, 4, 5 times. And when you start practicing things over and over and over, then they start to become habits of thought. And when my old habits of thought leave me because they're being replaced by new habits of thought, my life starts to change. And this is how I work step 7. I practice the principle for the day. One principle. I've been using the same book for almost 10 years, and I haven't seen fit to change because I haven't become perfect. There's a lot of books that are good. You know, pick any one you want. In the early days of the fellowship, I believe they used The Upper Room, which is published by the Methodist Church, I think. You don't need to read. If you belong to a religious church or a religious organization that has daily meditation, there's probably nothing wrong with using that. I like to use the Hazelden or the conference approved meditations because it keeps reminding me I'm an alcoholic. Okay, it says we usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. Every morning, I ask God to help me to remember that I'm an alcoholic and what it means. Not only do I have to remember that I'm an alcoholic, I have to remember what it means. What it means to me. And what it means to me can be many things. And I have to make sure that it means the right thing to me. My disease is a gift, as all things in my life are. There is no good or bad. Everything is a gift that I must use as it is given to me. I ask God to give me the strength to live my life one more day without alcohol. And then I go on from there. But I've got to make that daily commitment if I want to stay sober. That's the first thing I have to do. I have to renew the decisions that are required in this program in order for me to get the promises and to stay sober. Ooh, I'm talking a long time tonight. We ask especially for freedom from self-will, and are careful to make no request for ourselves only. Pray for other people's health, happiness, and prosperity. And then that will be my reward, because I want it for others, not because I want it for myself. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. If circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. If we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend to that also. If not members of religious bodies, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers which emphasize the principles we have been discussing. There are many helpful books also. Suggestions about these may be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they offer. Now remember, this book was a 12-step tool that was to be sent to the man all alone that didn't have a fellowship like we have today. So, that information in there. He was supposed to take the instructions in this book, read it, understand it, put it in action in his life. So they're telling him here, it's okay, get help wherever you can get it from. It says there are many good books. And that is not dated information. I believe that this book is the basis for my recovery from the disease of alcoholism. But it is not all the information that is available. It may not be all the information that is required in my life. All information that I take in, I have to look at in relation to how does it fit in with what is in here. How does it amplify and illuminate and enhance the information in here, and how can I use it to benefit others and to stay sober. I do not believe that I got sober in order to get stupid and closed-minded and say that this is the only book that I need in my life. I've got to keep control on myself, though. I can't get whacked out on something else. I can't get into pop psychology and say I finally found it now. I can't do a lot of things, but I can take in information from a lot of different sources and look at it in the light of what I need to do. We pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." I have to take God with me through my life. These aren't one-time things. These aren't 8 o'clock things. These aren't every once in a while things. These are habits of thought and disciplines that I have to incorporate into my thinking about whatever is going on in my life right now. It says, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. This excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, and foolish decisions just burns me down. It takes so much effort to always be shooting around corners and trying to straighten up messes. So it tells me that when I remove these things from my life, that I become more efficient. I don't tire so easily. So what the program does to me, or gives me, by putting it in my life, is mental courage. It lets me look at myself and the world around me through reality and not be offended, not be abused by looking at what's real about me and the world that I live in. mental courage. It gives me spiritual strength. I have the ability today to do things that I have never been able to do in my previous life because of the strength that comes from the spiritual program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was the most inept person that I can imagine looking at me through my eyes. I was subhuman in my abilities to perform a service to another human being. Today, when I'm not performing a service for another human being, I get pain. And back in step 7, we talked about pain being the messenger. And it says in step 7 that I need throughout the day to say, thy will be done. Over and over and over. Every time I get the pain, I say, I'm off on the wrong track. Thy will be done. I'm trying to force this thing again. And the last thing I get is physical endurance. I have more physical energy today because I'm not running around foolishly. I'm not exhausting myself mentally trying to figure my way out of this one more time. How am I going to get out of this mess? How am I going to make up a lie that they will believe this time? I've lied to them 19 straight times, and they caught me every time. I wonder, they probably wouldn't believe me if I told the truth by now, so I'll give them a good lie. My 9th grandmother died. That's why I was late to work. Well, she was a step-grandmother. Says it works. It really does. We alcoholics are undisciplined. So we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. But this is not all. There is action and more action. And there those words are again. It just never stops. It's action and more action. Faith without works is dead. Repeat it again. Faith without works is dead. It says the next chapter is devoted to step 12. Now I want to take a little time here, talk about some things in the 12 and 12. And I can't cover 11 pages in 25 minutes, so I'm not going to try. But there's a couple of things in here I'd like to talk about. On the page, bottom of last paragraph on page 97. Well, let's go up to maybe the paragraph right above that. About in the middle, it says, but we recoil from meditation and prayer as obstinately as the scientist who refused to perform a certain experiment lest it prove his pet theory wrong. Okay. See, if I start to pray and if I start to try to meditate and it works, something happens to me. I can feel something. I can see something that I couldn't see before. And that means that everything I've lived up to that point has been a lie. It's a hell of a risk to take. You know, but it says in how it works. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. It didn't say we held on to the good old ideas and threw out the bad. It says the old ideas didn't work. Of course, we finally did experiment, and when unexpected results followed, we felt different. In fact, we knew different, and so we were sold on meditation, prayer. And that, we have found, can happen to anybody who tries. And there's that word again. Every step in here usually has the word in it, just try. Even if you don't get any results, even if you don't think it's working, even if you don't like it, even if you feel foolish, even if you wish you didn't have to, just try. That's all. Just try. And if you try long enough, something will happen. And then you won't wish you didn't have to. Then you will like it. And all sorts of things start to happen then. And it has been well said that almost the only scoffers at prayer are those who have never tried it enough. And enough is a key word, because commencing a prayer life, something I have absolutely no experience in, means that I am going to have to find my way to some ground that works. So I have to commence and keep trying one day at a time and find what works. Because what works for me may not work for you. What I would tell you that I do and what happens to me may not be the same for you. We may have to take different routes, but we can all end up at the same place. And the only way you can find the route is to try enough until you find the path. Those of us who have come to make regular use of prayer would no more do without it than we would refuse air, food, or sunshine. And for the same reason, when we refuse air, light, or food, the body suffers. You know, and we've talked about this also, about a human being having spiritual needs that need to be met. And when my spiritual needs aren't met, then I start to starve to death. When my physical needs aren't met, I start to get sick physically. When my spiritual needs aren't met, I start to get sick spiritually. When I start to get sick spiritually, then I get sick mentally, and I get sick physically. It says in the big book, when I straighten out spiritually, I'll straighten out mentally and physically. It doesn't say get straightened out physically and mentally and you'll get straightened out spiritually. It's first things first. I'm a spiritual human being that has some physical and mental needs. And since I'm an alcoholic, my mental and physical needs cannot be met unless my spiritual needs are met. I came here with no spiritual needs met, and I learned how to meet them here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And with that, I healed. And when we turn away from meditation and prayer, we likewise deprive our minds, our emotions, and our intuitions of vitally needed support. As the body can fail its purpose for lack of nourishment, so can the soul. We need all the light of God's reality, the nourishment of His strength, and the atmosphere of His grace. To an amazing extent, the facts of AA life confirm this speechless truth. There is a direct linkage among self-examination, step 4 and step 10, meditation and prayer. Taken separately, that's one of those assassins looking for me, I think. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit. But when they are logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life. And you remember last week I was talking about the clock and the thunderstorm, which proceeds at its own private inner peace or pace. You know, and I said that's what I like to visualize myself as, that clock and the thunderstorm. And if I'm constantly looking at myself, and I am using meditation and prayer in my daily life, it says I will have an unshakable foundation for life, and I can keep on ticking, regardless of what's going on around me and what my circumstances may be. I can remember that right now I'm okay. Everything's all right now. Nobody's coming for me. I'm not starving to death. I got a place to live. I got air, water, and a place to stand on the planet. I may not like what's in the future, but I'll wait to deal with that when it gets here. Right now I'm okay. It's an unshakable foundation for life. Let's go over page 99. And for those of you who haven't been in the program long enough to have found this, the prayer of St. Francis is on this page. He doesn't call him by name, but it's that second complete paragraph that says, its author was a man who for several hundred years now has been rated as a saint. We won't be biased or scared off by that fact, because although he was not an alcoholic, he did, like us, go through the emotional wringer. And as he came out the other side of that painful experience, this prayer was his expression of what he could then see, feel, and wish to become. And he said, Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather than to comfort, seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, and to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. This is not a bad idea for me to put into my daily discipline, to read this prayer. It tells me everything that I don't want to be, and it tells me everything that I do want to be. I thrive on hatred, wrong, discord, error, doubt, despair, shadows, sadness. I want to be comforted. I want to be understood. I want to be loved. And those are the destructive things in my thinking. And it tells me that what I want to, that what my goal for the day is to love, is to forgive, is to bring about harmony, to deal in truth, to have faith, to have hope, to bring light, to bring joy, to comfort, to understand, and to love. And if I do that, it says, then I have forgotten myself, and then I will find that by forgiving I will be forgiven. It is by dying, and dying means the destruction of self-centeredness on page 14 in the book. That one awakens to eternal life. Let's go to page 100. Down in the middle of the last paragraph. Okay, let's read this whole paragraph here, the bottom one. When such thoughts break in, and we're talking about somebody thinking that all this is nonsense, it says, when such thoughts break in, we might recall a little ruefully how much store we used to set by imagination as it tried to create reality out of bottles. Yes, we reveled in that sort of thinking, didn't we? And though sober nowadays, we don't often try to do much. We often try to do much the same thing. Perhaps our trouble was not that we used our imagination. Perhaps the real trouble was our almost total inability to point imagination toward the right objectives. There's nothing the matter with constructive imagination. All sound achievement rests upon it. Tony, would you get me a cup of coffee, please? And what's important here is that I had to sort out the difference between creativity and imagination and fantasy. I thought when I let my mind gallop, or my brain gallop all over the place, that I was really being creative. I thought I was Mark Twain, and I'd sit down and I'd start writing stories. And I'm so proud that I kept them, because I get them out and I read them today, and I said, my God. This is the product of a diseased mind. Fantasy, as I've said before, is something generally that cannot be reproduced in reality, and I'm certainly not willing to get up off my couch and to put any work into it to even see if it can be reproduced in reality. I became a millionaire repeatedly on paper, sitting on my couch. Never made a phone call. But I proved it to myself many, many times. I sat there on my couch for almost 2 years, eating popcorn and pork and beans and drinking scotch, about to starve to death because I was so busy becoming a millionaire. And I couldn't get up and go to work anywhere. So creativity and imagination is the foundation of being a human being. You know, that's what makes us what we are. You know, that's why somebody learned how to make flint arrowheads. That's how somebody learned how to catch a fish. That's how somebody learned how to make a rocket. Creativity and imagination. If someone had asked me to use my fantasy life to get us to the moon by the year 1969, and they'd pay me whatever I asked, it'd be about 4,000 years before they ever caught on that I wasn't going to get them there. Fantasy ain't going to get me around the block, much less to the moon, with or without money. So I had to get that sorted out and start to use it properly and get fantasy out of my life. Let me see, where do I want to go here? I want to talk about meditation a little bit.
Dirt.
Yeah. On page 101, down at the bottom paragraph, and what he's talking about here is he's talking about thinking about what the prayer of St. Francis has taught us. When we read it, it says this much could be a fragment of what is called meditation, perhaps our very first attempt at a flyer into the realm of spirit, if you like. It ought to be followed by a good look at where we stand now and a further look at what might happen in our lives were we able to move closer to the ideal we have been trying to glimpse. Meditation is something which can always be further developed. I'll slow down here. It has no boundaries, either of width or height. Aided by such instruction and example as we can find, it is essentially an individual adventure, something which each one of us works out in his own way. And there is absolutely no way to teach somebody how to meditate, in my experience. Maybe the Maharishi Yoga or the Bhagwan can teach people how to meditate. But no one could teach me how to meditate, and I've never been able to teach anybody else how to meditate. I don't know that I've ever tried to teach anybody. I've given them suggestions. I don't know that anybody told me how. I had to find my own way. Meditation is wiping the blackboard clean of all information of the world in which I live, the physical world in which I live. And I'm going to tell you how I erase the blackboard. I think about dirt. I was born and raised on a farm down in Boone County. And we farmed Missouri River bottom. And we farmed up in the hill. And we raised hogs and pigs and cattle, sheep. Didn't have any goats. And we raised that old yeller corn and soybeans and wheat. I used to get up every morning and shovel corn to the hogs. We had horses, mules, had all kinds of neat stuff. Well, somewhere about 28 years ago, I decided that I needed to move to St. Louis, and I lost contact with dirt. I didn't have any dirt anymore. So when I got sober, I decided that I had to get some dirt back into my life. So I started planting things. And I got interested in what I was planting, and I got some books at the library, and I learned all kinds of things about the organic world. and I learned about how complex the soil is. I learned about the billions and billions and billions of animals that are in a thimbleful of healthy topsoil. In a thimbleful of topsoil, for example, one of the animals is called a mycelia, and there's a half a mile of it in a thimble full of healthy topsoil. And what the mycelia does, it has little claw-like hands, little claws, and it takes, it has a symbiotic relationship with the plant root, and it knows what plant or what root that plant belongs to, and it takes its little claw, and the plant needs some potassium, and it goes and it finds a rock that has potassium in it, a microscopic grain, and it pulls an atom out of that little grain, and it sets it over by the root so that it may be dissolved by water and the root can drink it. That's only one animal. There are millions. I thought that was pretty neat. Thanks for sharing that, huh? So I got so how I clear my mind. I started taking care of a little piece of ground, and I started putting organic matter in it, and taking care of it and making sure it was healthy and it would grow nice things. And I clear my mind by thinking about my dirt and about what's going on in my dirt, because different things go on at different times of the year in the different seasons, and I think about what's happening in that incredibly complex world without which there would be no human beings. This doesn't sound quite right, but the only thing that stands between the extinction of the human race is 6 inches of topsoil. Darwin said that the earthworm, the common earthworm, was more important on Earth than human beings because of the function that earthworms perform in building and maintaining the topsoil. Because without the earthworms, no other forms of life would be supported. So, but I'll get off of that tangent. That's what I start thinking about to relieve the cares of the world. You know? And from there, I can go where my mind takes me. You're going to have to do something different. I just told you what I did. I know it won't work for you. I can give you a bibliography of what I've read, though, if you're interested in dirt. Well, it goes on to say that, but its object is always the same, to improve our conscious contact with God, with His grace, wisdom, and love. And let us remember that meditation is in reality intensely practical. One of its first fruits is emotional balance. And that's what I wanted in my life, was emotional balance. I wanted to be the same person all the time. Why don't you take some time to read this on your own. Let's go to the last That's the last paragraph on page 105. I want to finish up here. Perhaps one of the greatest rewards of meditation and prayer is the sense of belonging that comes to us. Belonging to the human race. We no longer live in a completely hostile world. I have a loving God which enables me to see things in reality. That gives me the proper attitude about myself and about other people. The hostile world goes away. Nothing's changed except me. We are no longer lost and frightened and purposeless. I know where I've been, I know where I am, and I know the direction that I'm headed. I don't know where I'm going necessarily, but I know the direction that I'm headed. I'm not scared all the time. I'm not terrified all the time. And I have some purpose in my life to be of maximum service to God and other people. The moment we catch even a glimpse of God's will, the moment we begin to see truth, justice, and love as the real and eternal things in life, we are no longer deeply disturbed by all the seeming evidence to the contrary that surrounds us in purely human affairs. We know that God lovingly watches over us. We know that when we turn to Him, all will be well with us here and hereafter. Thanks for listening.